All right. So we're gonna make thanks, Linda. So we're gonna make next is a lidded container. Now, container could be, yes, a rectangular box. It could be a strange clamshell blob, whatever. But it needs to have a top and a bottom. Has to open using a joint tool. We're going to import some hardware into that joint. We're using the McMaster-Carr extension, so it'll actually have appropriate nuts and bolts or however you want to work. Later on, I'll show you how to remodel that for using more simplified printable hardware like a pin, or actually using just a simple strand of filament as your joint, or rather as your connector. It also needs to contain a thing. And we're going to use an imported file we have downloaded from any number of websites that you like, within reason. Like Printables, Thingiverse, My Mini Factory, Cult 3D. There's all kinds. The main thing, like I said, I will warn you, do not import something overly complex, because the import feature within Fusion imports your objects as a mesh, and a mesh can be extremely high detail. You can import them with lower resolution, but if it's a high resolution model, it might bog your computer down quite a lot. So be aware of that. And before you import the model, definitely make sure you have saved. So let me hop over to Fusion and I'll show you the examples again. So this is more of my just kind of amorphous blob pill bottle kind of shape thing, but it opens and closes with clicking and dragging. It will only go so far, 180 degrees on this, because I've set this up. Now this one actually uses, and I will hide the lid and container, just a simple pair of cylinders with ends so it doesn't slip out. This would be a printable pin. But for the actual project, my mistletoe container is a full, somewhat trapezoid shape, has holes on the top because it has to have extra features for my mistletoe, and it does use hardware imported from McMaster-Carr, a threaded rod and nuts on the end. Now again, you can see, let me hide the additional hardware. My imported model, the mistletoe, because it just also cracks me up because I'm simple like that. A mesh is, rather than the solids we have been playing with, which is much more simplified shapes, but with kind of smooth surfaces, a mesh is composed of all of these little facets, all of these triangular shapes. So it can make for a very detailed file, but it can make for a very complex, or more specifically, a larger file. So be cautious when you're downloading something. Go from there. But has a lid, has all the parts, and it opens and closes. This one also has a little thumb feature, just something to grab onto, so it could technically open more easily. So, alrighty. Now, because we're using imported models as our what our container does contain, it's scalable. So the size is somewhat irrelevant of the file itself. So you can make a container and then find something that you just feel like sticking in there and then resize it. But again, let's play around the parameters of like 150, 200 millimeters square or cubed max, just so you know. So if you wanted to print these, it doesn't go completely gigantic. Again, though, you could always scale everything down uniformly in a slicer program. So, whichever. All right. So let's start something here. That sounds more like a threat. Open a new file, immediately save. So Control Save. I have my lidded container file open already. So sample in class container. All right. So with this, I am going to start with with importing my model I downloaded from Thingiverse. To do that, you would think go to File, Import, but that's not there. So what you actually have to do to bring something in, it's over on the right side under the Insert tab. We brought in canvases this way. In this case, we're going to go down to insert mesh. So it automatically brings stuff into it as a mesh. And obviously you can see it brings in an STL, OBJ, or 3MF file. We'll discuss those details later, but just know that those are different model files. Import mesh. Select for your computer, and I brought in an anatomical heart. Boom. Now, obviously, I can scale this, move it around as needed, but since I'm going to build this kind of right smack in the middle, I'll leave it right where it is, and I can move it around as needed later. If you want to orbit this around, maybe you want to lead it over, something like that, that is fine. Your options are bring it in millimeters or inches or something like that. Like I said, I recommend keeping it in millimeters. Flip direction just changes it around again. You could bring it to the center. Move to ground if you have a plane already established. That's fine. You can make these changes later. It's okay. Hit OK. There we go. So it's going to bring this in as a body. Now, because of how I want to work with this, I want to create separate components. You can do that as you go along. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new component outright. New component. Heart. Okay. Now that's going to ghost out the object because the anatomical heart is currently in the overall project. It's not within anything. Remember, you can just drag and drop. Boop. There you go. Now my heart is in the heart component. Now be mindful, I did leave the checkbox selected that activates that component. I didn't mean to do that, so be aware that when you're creating new components, that you don't accidentally nest components within themselves. So I'm going to go back, reactivate the whole project. There we go. Now, right now, I have no idea how big this is. Again, I can scale it, but I don't know how big it is. So this would be a good time to figure that out. I go to inspect, and I can just select points. Now, because this mesh is pretty dense, you can see all of the different vertices and such. I'm just going to pick something somewhere along one end and something all the way around the other. Now, obviously, this would have helped if I had left it straight up and down, but there we are. So that is 110 millimeters long. That's not bad. That works for me. Okay. At least I have an established point. I know how big I can make my container. All right. We'll hit OK, move from there. Close that. Resize, and away we go. Okay, cool. So I've established that. We brought in the heart. I'll just save it. Model mesh import, just so we have that reference point. Savey save. All right. So I can create my components, but I want to talk to you about normally, or at least in the prior project, we have separated things out into their separate components first. With this project, because I am making a container that has two matching halves, or at least it shares a common profile at the center, I'm not going to start my sketch in either component at all. I'm going to create it on the outside. This just helps make things easier. So I'm going to create a sketch. If you have difficulty selecting the plane, hide the heart, or whatever your model is. Or if you haven't created the model, there you go. But I can get it pretty easily. There we go. Now, I'm just going to create this as, let's just start as a rectangle, keep it simple. Use a center point rectangle, center origin, bring this out, give myself enough room to work. Now, luckily, even though I already took a measurement of this heart, obviously working this way with my model smack in the center of the project, I can just work uniformly outward as I need to, or non-uniformly, and go from there. I'm just going to enter whole numbers because it helps me work. So with this, all right, yeah, 130 millimeters. It's 132 currently. Let's just make it 130, make it easier. The other is 98. Well, then let's make it 100. Again, I'm just making it easier on myself. Okay, now this is going to create a rectangle. I can add some fillets here if I want, or I can add those after the fact. I think I'm going to add them now. So I'll go to fillet, select my first two edges, and it creates a fillet in the corner. Now, 25 is way big. Let's shrink that down. I don't know, 10? That seems more reasonable. Now, if I hit enter, it's going to lock that one in. Or if I don't hit enter, I can continue selecting around, and it's going to link all of my corners, and they're all going to function as a linked unit. So now, if I make adjustments to one, it adjusts all of them. So that's an easy way to just link them all. Again, make it simple, make it easier on yourself. 10 millimeters or less, fine. Okay, that's going to be my outline. That's pretty much it. So making the container can be very straightforward with this. And I'm just getting a warning on constraints because it was already a set rectangle, and my radii, or the radii for my fillets, changed that. It's just a warning. Hey, you changed something. Yeah, I know. That was the point. All right. So from here, I can just extrude. So if you want, leave it as is, and we'll create this. We'll create or drag and drop the top and bottom later. So for right now, makes sense. Let's go ahead and extrude, and we'll make the bottom. Just going to the right, so I have enough that it drops down. All right, so it looks like it stops where the heart would be at about -44. So let's go a bit more. Let's go ahead and make it -50 just for round numbers. Why not? Okay. Now, I can make the top, but I do want to back up for a second because I wanted to show you a couple of things within the extrude stuffs. Things that you can play around with is obviously operation, new body. It's not going to join. One, because you cannot join a solid with a mesh. They must be same body types. If you convert the mesh to a solid, they can join. But that will be if you thought that your computer bogged down before, that could really bog down the computer. So we're not joining them right now anyway, so it doesn't matter. But just don't know that if you actually wanted them to interact, like say I wanted to use a body like the imported model and perform a combined cut so it would fit perfectly within my container, you have to convert the mesh to a solid, and that can really bog down a computer with something that is as complex as this model is. So be mindful of that. But what I wanted to show you is I can add something like a taper to this. This is what my Toad missile box is. This slight taper to the lid, that was done during the actual extrusion. And that is just this taper angle. This is technically made for, like, if you're making something like a mold or something that would be able to be released, you want a little bit of a taper on it because it makes it easier to release than a straight up and down surface. But this is also a neat thing. So negative number goes inward, positive number goes outward. So if I hit a 5, you can see from the side, it tapers outward. -5 shrinks in. Great, I'm making a McNugget box. Whatever. And there you go. That's just a way that you can add an additional feature built right in. Could I do something like this later? Absolutely. But this is a way you could do that. Hit OK? All right. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways you can make this hollow. Let me make the what will be the lid first and go from there. So do another extrude. I'm going to, now technically I can extrude off of this surface, but in case that gets screwy, the reason I'm building all of these, again, outside of any separate component, is I can still bring up my sketch. Again, if I had added additional features into this, that's how I could do it. But let's extrude that sketch and go up. They do not have to match. So going upwards, 30 looks about it. So let's make that, I don't know, 40. Sure. Now, be careful, do not join them together. I want new body. And technically, I could add new component, but we're going to do that in a moment. And we'll do the same. I'll do a -5 taper, make it a little shrinky. There we go. All right. So I have a couple of ways I can hollow these out. Now, for the sake of the project and such, I'm going to go ahead and drop these into their respective components now. So first, I want to create the components. So lid. I forgot to uncheck the box, so make sure they go back and reactivate the whole project. New component. This would have been the activate that I forgot to uncheck. There you go. And we'll just say base. Okay. So now my auto colors are going to be those there. So body 1, base, label those bodies. Again, this is just helping me keep everything sorted. Great. Now I'm just going to drag and drop these to the respective component. Sound effects are helpful. There you go. So now they're separated out. I can worry about it less, or at least it's be less of an issue. So for the base, let's hide the lid. There we go. So traditionally, what we've been working with, easy way to do this would be to perform an extrude and cut downward with an offset. What that means is create a sketch on the lid there, and I need to create a offset of that outline. But my sketch is elsewhere. Now, technically, I could go back and adjust this original sketch and work it from there. But one of the things you could do with this, with Fusion, is you could borrow profiles or sketches from other ones without like copying and pasting. Let me hide the heart so it simplifies the image. What that is called is project. Go down to create at the bottom, project include. It's this tool, project, or just press P. Boop. Now I just need this outline, or if you just want the whole outline, select body, select there, hit OK. And now what will happen is, let me hide the base. It just makes this outline, this purple here, helps me work through. Now, problem is I just realized I did not activate the base when I worked on this. So let's see where we get with that. So what I need though is I'm trying to do that because I want to use offset and create, let's say, I don't know, 3mm walls. That seems reasonable. Okay. I'll finish the sketch because that's what I'm going to use to extrude downward. Okay. Now I messed up. I should have activated the base. So let's drag and drop that sketch too onto the base. Great. Now the reason I'm putting that one specifically in that component is because I'm going to do something that is specific to that component. My main sketch, which is just, and I'll label this now, box outline, just helps keep things clear. That is something that can work on either component. So that's all. Again, if you mess up, drag and drop it, no problem. You're good. All right. Now, the reason I did this is I can use extrude. And now that I have just that inset, and that outline is messing with me, so there we go. Now I can extrude this downward, and it's going to cut into the box. Couple problems, though. One, I added a taper to the original extrude, so I need to make sure to add that to my Extrude-Cut. So -5-degree taper, there we go. And as I go to a side profile, you can see as I drag that down, that's going to keep that same taper. Now the problem is I got to remember what number I made the walls, meaning I know it was only 3mm, but I don't want to remember that stuff. We're doing math because I want to be lazy. What you can do is rather than using dragging or entering the distance numerically, what I can do is use extent types. And this is something I can use to object, like here. So I can select the bottom surface, but that's going to cut all the way through. But I can go back and use an offset. 3mm offset, actually -3. And that's going to maintain that 3mm distance, as you can see. The reason I would do that is if I went back and hit OK, if I went back and changed the depth of this box, because I put in the to object with an offset, it's going to maintain that 3mm away from the bottom of that surface, no matter what distance I make that extrusion. So that one was the bottom. So if I went back and made that, I don't know, -62.5, it doesn't matter. Hit OK, recalculates, and now that base, that extrusion is going to maintain that distance. Also, because I made the taper match, it's going to just extend that. And there you go. Now, obviously, my box is way too deep now, so I'll go back with that. And I don't even remember what I put. I think it was -50. Sure. There we go. Okay. Just more features you can add. But again, I want to be lazy about this. That's like a lot of work. So let's make it a lot easier on ourselves for the lid. I'm going to use the tool Shell. What this does is it's basically a three-dimensional offset off of a solid. So instead of like a line sketch, it does it for an entire body. So select Shell, select the underside of the box, and I want the thickness, same as the top, 3 millimeters. That just did exactly with all of those steps. One operation did the exact same thing. There you go. So let the program do the work. Shell works very easily to instantly create what I just did with all of those additional steps. All right, there's pretty much a simple box. Now again, I have my lid, all of that. My heart is in fact floating in there, so I could definitely make an adjustment to that, but we'll deal with that in a bit. Let's save there. Box made. All right. So from here, this is going to be a lidded container. I need to make a hinge. Now, there are so many different types of hinges. We're going to make just a really simple one with a couple of lobes. And what I mean by that lobes is like this. You can make as many as you like, and you can make it as complex as you like. But we're just going to work it simply for now, build from there. Now, again, the reason I made the lid, top and bottom in separate components and that outline in its on the full project sketch is so it can share those features. I'm going to do the same thing again with my hinge. So I'm going to create a new sketch, only this time I'm going to use the XZ plane, so looking at the side, and if I'm having trouble selecting it, so let me hide the lid for a second and the heart for now. So there we go. Unhide the lid. There we go. Now I am still active in the overall project. So this project can be accessed from any of the other parts of this project. This is what I need. Now I want to make just a really basic hinge, and I'm going to build it off of the lid here. So what that will mean is I'm going to build it right up against. So I'm going to use a 2-point circle right at that point, and I'm going to build it outward. Now, obviously, you might want to consider what size material you want to use for screws and such. I'm just going to say like 6 millimeters. 6 millimeter is about a 1/4 inch. So like a 1/4 inch screw, 1/4 20. An M6 screw will be perfect for this. So 6 millimeter would work, but I need enough material around that. So just make it a little bit larger. So let's just say 10. If I want, nope, 10, not 1. 10 might be a little small, but we can always change that later. Now I messed up. It's going way out. Ugh, I hate when it does this. Now that is not centered. Ugh. Let's make sure to make that center. No, that's not going to work. Oh, collinear? No, that's not going to work either. All right. So if you have trouble with that, maybe just make a line straight out. There we are. I hate when it does. I hate that it does that. No. Ugh. And this is one of the things that just irritates the hell out of me about Fusion. Fine, I'll delete it and do it over. The only reason I'm doing that is just so that I can keep it on that line. So let's say it's 10 millimeters. There we go. So now it locks onto that line. Good. Okay. And the reason I'm saying that, by like thinking like, what size might I want to use? I'm going to start now a center point circle and say, yeah, all right, that's going to be 6 millimeter. I'm just going to make a hole that would be for 6 millimeters. Great. Now that is just a circle. I also need what's going to be these lobes that would actually connect it to the part. So this is where I can just draw lines on here, but I need to borrow the outline of the lid and bottom. So this is where that project tool comes in. Press P, and I want to have it selecting for the entire body. I want to select the top one and the bottom one. Hit OK. And now, if I need, I can hide the base and the lid, and I have that purple outline. So now that is a sketch line built into this current sketch I'm working that I borrowed from the outline of that shape. It's kind of straightforward when it's a rectangular box, but if I was doing something that was round, it's harder to get the edge profile. So I could do the same thing on a round object, and it's going to take the outline profile and borrow that. So it's a really handy tool when you're building on top of something else. All right, there we go. From here, you just need like something to connect these. So for here, let's just do like a line and something out there. I don't know, that seems reasonable-ish. That's a center point, and I want that to be tangential just for reasons. Select tangent, that line to that circle, snaps it out. There we go. Super. I'm going to do the same, something, something, and you can make this a lot shorter if you want. Does not matter. Fine. There we go. And I'm just making tangent because I'm being nitpicky. Tangent constraint to the circle. Boop, there we go. Little tangent circle, or the tangent symbol. There we are. Okay, that's it. That's literally it. That's all I need to make these parts. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and label that sketch as hinge. Great. So as I orbit around and unhide the lid and base, you can see that sketch now is in the center of all of that, but because it's not within either of the other two components, I can make use of that on either of those two components. So before I go any further, save hinge sketch. Neat. Savey. Come on. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to use extrude to create these parts. Now you can create multiple lobes. I'm just going to make this simple for the sake of the conversation. So I'm going to use extrude to do this, but make sure to select and activate whichever component you're going to make the parts for. So I'm going to make the lid hinge, or the lid part. So I activate that, the bottom hides. Go to extrude, I'm now working on the lid section. I select the lobe and both sides of that circle. Now I want it to actually go in both directions, so I say symmetric, and let's go whole length overall. As I drag this out, you see how it automatically operation switches to join, and it becomes part of the lid component. That is why I made the sketch outside of either component, but activate the relative component like this, the lid, when I make the extrude, so it makes that part built into the component. Super handy. All right, 20 millimeters, that seems reasonable. Okay, there we go. All right, do the same for the base. This one takes a couple extra steps. Now, of course, because I did a thing, it hid the sketch, so unhide your sketch so you can actually use the thing again. This time, activated the base, hit extrude, select the bottom lobe, and the same two circles. Now this time, I am going to go one side, but if I just start it, it's going to start it smack in the middle. That's no good. So like we did with the extent type changing, this time we're going to start or change where it starts from. And I'm going to use object. Yeah, I could do offset, measure it. I don't feel like measuring. Select object, and I can select the face of the hinge lobe from the lid, and it's going to start from there. It is going to join, but because I have the base component active, it's only going to connect with the base component. So I don't know. Let's say 10. There we go. Again, I'm just keeping it even numbers. Join. Okay, but it only goes one direction, so I got to do the bottom one twice. Right click, repeat extrude. Samey. This time I'm going to go the other way, so -10. But again, change where it starts. Object, select that face, snaps it over there. Boop, there we go. That's it. Really easy to make parts like this. Now I can keep going, make multiple lobes, if it's like a door hinge or something like that. But for now, keep it simple. You can make these much smaller, or you can make this giant if you want, but that's up to you. All right, save, hinge, modeled. Now, the last part to complete the very basic part is we need to use the joint tool to link these together. Because right now, that didn't do anything. Those are just floating in space. By the by, when you do move stuff like this, these two tools will pop up. Capture position is when you move a thing, a fusion kind of assumes maybe you did that on purpose. So if you select capture position, it's going to lock it in those new coordinates. Or it assumes you didn't mean to do that. So revert position snaps it back where you just were. Yes, you could use Control Z or Command Z, but this does it kind of officially. All right. We need to create a joint to link these two together. So over a symbol, next to where we've been doing new component, is the joint tool. Now, don't get confused. There's duplicate with joints. This is a new tool. We're not going to deal with this right now. This is kind of a way to make copies and also snap them into place. We're using just joint. So as you can see, or just press J. Not only does it link two different components together, not bodies, but components together, it will also move them as you like. If you're unsure, bring down the drop down, assemble, go to joint, it's the same thing. There we go. All right. So what I need to do though is technically I can make this joint linked between these two faces or right between these two spots, but I'm going to put them smack in the middle of where it would be like the center of movement. So let me hide the sketch and all that. So it kind of cleans this up a little bit. And I actually want this joint to be floating inside of this cylinder. You see when I mouse over here, it highlights the inside. I want this to actually be all the way in there. And Fusion has actually gotten good with assuming you mean like the inside of a thing. So what I'm going to do, and if you have trouble selecting, you can always hide a part, but keep this in mind. The first thing you select, you have two selections. The first component is what will move, and I both mean it will be the thing that moves like a hinge, but also if you're putting these, like if you drop this in two different spots in your project, it will also move it to the second point you select. So this is as joint can also be used as a convenient way to like snap things in place. So what that means is I need to be careful where I'm selecting. So I'm going to hide the base because I want to select inside this tube. Now, as you see, as I mouse over, it tries to select the center there, but I actually want the center of the circle, but also the center of the cylinder. And that little triangle floating in the middle is the middle. So as I mouse over there, sometimes it hides because I'm trying to select the surface now. So just orbit around if you're having trouble with that. Having trouble anyway. So let's see. What you can do is if you are having trouble selecting, see it's showing that triangle, that midpoint, but I'm having trouble getting there. It won't let me select. What you could do is press and hold Control. That will lock the selection features. If I'm mousing over a surface, if I press and hold Control, it will lock to only selections on the same plane as that surface. But since I'm floating within the cylinder and it's already selecting the middle of the circle of the cylinder, as I press and hold Control, it locks that direction. So now, since the selector isn't following, snaps right over to the center. So I'm just pressing and holding Control. Boop, there you go. Ghosts out the first part. Fine. All right, unhide the base. I actually want to put it right in the same spot. So I'm going to have trouble selecting that. Or press and hold Control, see if it'll let me snap over. It's only letting me select within that cylinder. So this gets a little tricky if I'm trying to get to that. I want to select the exact same spot because I don't need to move it anywhere. So one of the other features you have here is select, not just simple like I just used, is between two faces. So I select that version, and what I can do, let me hide the lid entirely because that just gets confusing. I'm going to select the one face and the other one. Now it'll let me snap between there. And all I need to do is select the cylinder. You see how my icon matches up with the first one now? Because it's selecting between those two faces. But now that I mouse over the cylinder, it plops it right between that imaginary line, that construction line, right in the smack in the middle. Boop, there we go. Now, by default, it's going to be a rigid joint. The other tab you have on the joint tool is your motion. Rigid is like you just glued the two things together. And if you hit preview motion, it gives you anxiety. One we're going to be using is Revolute. Now, obviously, this is going to clip right there. It's clipping through, but that's all right. We'll go through a bunch of different ones for later on. You have like slider, cylindrical, moves along a path and also rotates. Ball is like a ball joint and just kind of freaks you out a little bit. So we're going to stick with Revolute. Okay. Hit okay. All right. We got a joint. Now, the problem is I need to make some selections because as I drag, well, for one, it just grabbed the whole project and moved it. I don't want that. So let's revert position. We have two steps we need to do. I need to set some limits and I need to ground an object. What that means is I need to lock one of these objects in position so it doesn't move at all. And that'll be the base. All you got to do is go to the component, right click. The second selection down is ground. There you go. A little pin symbol, a little push pin symbol appears on the component. Now that base part is locked in virtual position. It cannot move unless I right click and unground it. So now when I open and close, or I click and drag the lid, stays put, and only the lid moves around that joint. Cool. Revert position. Now I'm going to go and set some limits on this. If I mouse over the joint or the joints tools, and again, because I made the joint in the whole project, not in either of these components, open that up, mouse over, and you can either right click and go to edit joint, or this little symbol shows up, same diff. Got a new toolbar. All right. Now you can set these limits. Let's select both of those, minimum, maximum. You can either do it numerically, or you can grab one of these little flags and rotate it. So it doesn't have to be 180. You can do like, all right, there we go, 125. All right. I can hit preview, and it's just going to show me an animation of. And there you go. So it's really straightforward with that part. Although it's a variety of steps. All right, so let's save that. Joint added. Okay. And of course, we have our still beating heart in there. Or not. The other part of this project, the main thing is I want to bring hardware in. So it's just a different way of importing stuff. That's it. The option is now, Fusion now has this insert fastener option, which actually it works pretty well the same, but I like the selection feature better on the McMaster-Carr. All it is a website. It's a store, McMaster-Carr. Cool to order. Or, okay, maybe it's not cool, but it's effective and easy to order hardware from them. So this just brings up a mini website bar. So this is just exactly the same thing as it would be in a web browser. All you're going to do is go and select something. So let's just say like screws and bolts. Okay. And because it's metric, I planned on that. We're using metric. And I made that hole 6 millimeters. So go to M6. Real easy. Now, the trick is I need this to go all the way through. So it's kind of a long screw. It's 50 millimeters. So you might want to shrink the lobe. So let's see what they have. All right, 50, 55. It needs to be a little bit longer. Cool. Let's say 55. Neato burrito. Doesn't matter. I don't know. We'll go with a socket head screw. Okay. And this is just playing around. Let's go stainless because stainless is fancy and pretty. Now, sometimes I don't like that you can't resize this window. You can move it, but you can't resize it. So that kind of gets to be a pain. But what you do is you just go to the object or the part number. You're there. And you can import full hardware parts. This is really handy, especially like you can import things like if you want to build like a table and it has caster wheels on it, you can import a completed model of the entire caster wheel. So really a really easy way to work. Now, we're not using SolidWorks. So what we want to select on here, I know it's very confusing, is step file. Just think of the next step is a step file. That helps me. And then just go to download. And it's going to plop it into your project. All right. Now, I prefer to at least just move it out and kind of move it in the direction I want it to go. So 90 degrees. Great. All right. So let's hit OK. It brings it in as a new component. One more thing, I want to bring in some hardware. Now, see, I actually do want to capture position. I moved it, so capture position. Yeah. Bring in, insert, do exactly the same thing again, and I just want to plop a nut on the other end. Let's say, nuts. M6 again. And let's get a fancy acorn nut. Yeah, stainless because shiny fancy. It will remember your selection. So the next step is a step file of that acorn nut. Bloop. Brings it in, move it around. Doesn't matter where you plop it, but I do want to orient it properly. So 90 degrees. Got it. Capture position, because it's going to keep bugging you if you don't select that. Okay, that's it. Now I can snap these into position with a joint. So I'm going to select joint, and I want to plop it. Actually, at the end here, why did it select that? Cancel, that's odd. Why is it hiding that? That's strange. It's okay, that's weird. I don't know why it's highlighting that. I have the whole project selected. That's strange. Anyway, what I'm going to do with this is this gets a little screwy, a unintentional pun. I need to select because I need to select the inside of this face here. It's really easy to select just because I want it to match up with that outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mouse over, face there. You can see it highlights inside. There you go. Selected that one. Now I'm going to select this floating space up top. If you have trouble selecting the top of the cylinder, that hole, remember, mouse over the lobe, that face, press and hold Control. You'll select the top. Now the screw flies over into position. Now it's going to stay as the last one you selected, revolute. You just leave it as rigid. It locks it into position there. Okay. Oh, I guess I made it way too long. I should have picked a shorter bolt there. That's okay. Now, because I did that, and we'll fix it later. I'll select something shorter. Now, ideally, what I would be doing is fit the face of this acorn nut to this lobe also, but I'm going to show you how you can snap it relative to that screw. So I'm going to have another joint here. I don't know why it keeps ghosting that out. Weird. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to select, if I can see it, let me hide the lid. I'm trying to select the inside floating spot there of the inside of that acorn nut. Select that top one. There you go. So I'm just selecting, if you can see a little more easily as I orbit around. It's just the inside of the screw. That's all. Or the inside of that nut. And now the second selection, just the face of that nut, that bolt. And now it's going to fly that over. Bloop, and hit OK. And it's a rigid joint. So I definitely should have chosen a shorter screw. I forgot what that measurement was. I thought I had made it like 50 millimeters wide. Clearly I did not. But there you go. Those are all locked into position. So that's the basic making a lidded container. Again, those the bolt and nut are linked to one another through a joint. It's a rigid joint, so it's like they're glued together. That's all, or they've been screwed together. The lid now opens and closes. There you go. So make whatever shape you like. It could be round, it could be squarish, rounded out. Next time, we'll show you how to add some features and such like that in. But that's the basics on making a simple container and importing multiple stuffs. So good luck with it, and find something weird to stick in there, I guess, or whatever's entertaining to you. All right.